Hi, everybody. Welcome to the penultimate episode of the live streams on manuscripts. Now, from now on, Kyra Dawkins and Mackenzie Finkley will be keeping you company with the Coffee Chat series. So there will be plenty of entertainment and content about writing and publishing. But as far as the winter streams go, next Tuesday will be our last one. But let's focus on here and now, though. We have plenty of good stuff prepared. Today, we'll be talking about how to becoming an indie author. We've had our fair share of guests that talked about traditional publishing, self-publishing. We always try to be as unbiased as possible, merely providing you with information rather than guiding you towards a decision. But today, since the deadline for a submission of your manuscript for consideration is January 31st, I have decided to talk to my colleague, Emily Vanderven here, who, as a successful indie author, will give you what I think will be, given the circumstances, a very biased but very honest opinion. So, Emily, thank you for joining me. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Zara. Sorry, that's your pen name. I almost called you your real name.
It's okay. We're all friends here.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Right. So, Emily, I'm your biggest fan. But for those who don't know, update your fans on your current situation regarding your third book. So, when can we expect the final installment of the Crimson Time series to see the light of day?
Yes. So, plot twist, it probably won't be the last.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right now, I'm hoping for around the fall of this year is sort of the tentative date
Nice.
of book 3, which is Veiled Scars. But yes, I thought there would just be 3, but with how it's going, it looks like there will probably be 4.
There will probably be 4. Okay, so it won't be a trilogy then, but that's totally fine. And it do be like that sometimes, right? The story takes you, the story develops. And this is especially an interesting development because you, Emily, you are a planner. You're not a pantser.
Yeah.
So technically this should not have happened.
No, it shouldn't have.
I mean, before we get into all of that, tell us about your creative process. Like, how did this come to be that you had a planned trilogy and now there's going to be the 4th book?
That, Simone, Zara, sorry, I just again. Yeah, that's a really great question. I really didn't see it coming. Again, it goes back to like the things that we've talked about before, where even if you're a planner like I am, you can sit down and you can plan a book or you can plan a series down to a T. But when you actually like sit down and go to write it, it sort of grows and breathes and like carries on its own. So yeah, there were just things that I had planned that didn't end up happening or felt too soon for like book 2 versus book 3, or felt too late, and I had to sort of keep moving them around. New things sort of cropped up as I was writing the different books, where I was like, oh, maybe this has to happen instead, so I had to put something else off for later, and it sort of kept like growing and evolving on its own. So you got to listen to like where the story needs to go and sort of follow it and trust that like whatever's going on in your head is making sense, and that like the story will ultimately end where it needs to be. So so I'm not upset that it's going to be 4 instead of 3. Who knows, maybe it'll end up being 5 instead of 4. I don't know, but I'm gonna keep writing
and see what happens.
That it's gonna trust
and
where it needs to go.
Right. And I think that the crucial piece of information is that you're not upset about it, right? To come to terms with the fact that a story is not like a car. There's no go-to manual, like the parts that need to be there in order for the car to actually start. Story is like a living organism, right? You got to listen to it. It
Very
has
much
its own brain. Right. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing, Emily. Now, I do have a question for you. So let's get right into it. You are a very successful indie author, and how did you get into indie publishing? Because you're quite young, obviously, and it had to be a decision. Someone must have led you to it, etc., etc. I want to hear all about that. The main factors you considered that played into your final decision. Just tell us how you reached this conclusion.
Yeah, so it's sort of an interesting winding journey, and I'll try to sort of like be succinct in how I like explain it. Um, but basically, I senior year of college had like a bunch of credits to just sort of eat up because I had done basically everything I needed to do at that point.
Right.
So I decided to take an independent study because I've always wanted to like finish a book start to finish. I've started a bunch of books, but just sort of tapered off over the years, and kept sort of hopping from idea to idea. But senior year, since I had that extra time, I decided to go ahead and do an independent study, work through with my professor on a book, and like actually get one completely written. So sort of simultaneously while I was doing that, I made a LinkedIn for the first time because that's what you do when you're job searching and networking and everything like that, senior year of college. And I was just scrolling through one day, and a post from Haley Newland, who is an author within this ecosystem, sort of just popped up on my feed. And she was talking about, it was like a picture from a book signing that she had just done, sort of talking about her journey and everything like that. And I had sort of like that tug in my gut where I was like, oh, like I'm so happy for her. I didn't even know her at this point. So I have no idea how her post showed up on my feed. But I was like, oh, like I am so excited for her. But like this is something that like I want to do too.
Yeah.
So I sort of took that chance. Normally I don't like reach out to people that I see posts and whatnot, but I was like, I'm gonna send her a message. So I sent her a message and I was just like, hey, I'm Emily, like congrats on your recent publication. I'm writing a book right now, and publishing it is something I would really like to do. And I sort of just asked her, like, do you have any advice or suggestions or anything like that for someone who like wants to do what you're doing now? And she was super sweet. She responded, ended up connecting me with her publisher, which was New Degree Press. And I talked to Eric and sort of did my own research on traditional and indie publishing and sort of like the pros and cons of each one. And so I ultimately decided to go indie based on a few different things. One was, like I said, this was the first book that I had taken from like start to finish.
Yeah.
So I was still sort of learning how I work as a writer, what good writing actually looks like, how to hold myself accountable to like sitting down in my seat and like cranking out words and whatnot. I was also sort of trying to use this series less of like a writing for the public type of thing and more a writing for me, even though it's young adult historical fantasy, writing for me to sort of creatively process some different traumas that I've gone through. And then I also, aside from some of the research that I did, I really didn't know much about like the publishing world in general. And I wanted to sort of, through indie publishing, hands-on learn everything that goes into taking a book from like an idea to like an actual book that you're holding in your hand. So there's no like right or wrong answer to this for anyone when you're trying to decide, do you go indie? Do you sort of go a hybrid method? Do you go traditional? I would sort of just recommend that you sit down and sort of know what your goals are for yourself and for that book. And that may change from book to book. I have 2 indie books published right now, working on my 3rd one that's going to be indie published. I have some other ideas that I know that I want to indie publish, but I also have some books that I might try to query and try something different with. So again, it's like there's no right or wrong answer, and it's a book by book basis. So just because you did something for book 1 doesn't mean you have to do it for book 2. Just because you did something for this genre doesn't mean you have to stick to that. You can hop around and sort of keep playing around and see what ultimately like works best for you.
I think that's really good advice, especially the one where it's not a definitive thing being an indie author. If you, for your first book, decide I think that for this particular story, maybe the market is not really good right now. The traditional publishing market is not really good for that. I'll just be wasting my time acquiring. Let me just self-publish this. But then another book, you get an idea. And I think you really hit the nail on the head saying that essentially it doesn't have to be just just one thing. And you can switch and start acquiring for other story that you think might be successful. Because let's be honest here, acquiring is very tiring. You have a job that is writing the book, and mind you, we're talking about fiction. So for you out there, for those of you out there who don't know, if you're a fiction author, there's no such thing as only writing half the book or three-quarters of a book and then sending the pitch to the agent. You have to have a whole manuscript ready. For nonfiction, that's something different. There you can sort of crank out chunks of your book and you go acquiring. But with fiction, you have to have a whole manuscript ready. So I really do appreciate that you emphasize that, for this particular story, this will do better in a self-publishing, indie publishing, hybrid publishing in that market. But with another story, you might start trying acquiring, right? It's fine.
Yeah.
So it's not like, you have to, like in the olden days of our parents, when you found a job and you stayed in that job for 40 years. Now it's evolved, right? We jump around here and there. We don't even do work that we, studied in the college. It's just, and writing is very much, the writing and publishing industry is very much the same. So it doesn't have to be one thing. So yeah, thank you, Emily.
You're
Wonderful advice. So I've mentioned that you are a successful author, very successful. You you have events, you talk to people, you talk to kids, you do book boxes and all that stuff. So you sort of found your own way. And personally speaking, again, because you can't generalize, and I want to know about your experience so that people can get inspired, if nothing else, by your success. What do you objectively consider a success in indie publishing, and what are some of the practical steps to follow it?
Yeah, so this kind of applies to anything, but I would say indie publishing, like, too, specifically, since that's like what we're talking about, is it's very much one of those things that you get out of it what you put into it. Obviously, there are sort of like, there's things out of your control and there's like exceptions to that rule and whatnot. The publishing world is constantly sort of in flux. What readers are looking for is sort of constantly in flux. So there are things out of your control, but I would say for the most part, like, that really rings true. Mm-hmm. You really need to be willing to sort of put in the time, the energy, and oftentimes too the money, in order to like have that end product of a good quality book that like you are proud of having your name on at the end, and that readers are going to feel satisfied with the story and enjoy the reading of it. Really, like, being willing to learn and try and fail and like do it all over again would be like another really key point of that too. I guess like a funny example of that is like, for Crimson Time, I did my own audiobook.
I remember.
I learned I am not a voice actress. I think I've sold like 7 audiobooks, and Crimson Time came out like July of 2020. So like, I learned that maybe for the next ones, I should have someone else do the audiobook and actually like invest the money into that versus doing it myself. And not necessarily like seeing the outcome that I wanted from that by taking that shortcut. So you live and you learn, you try and you fail and you do it again. And you have to be willing to sort of put in that time, that energy, that work, be willing to do your research, and sort of like I mentioned earlier, like ask questions too. If I would have never reached out to Haley and asked that initial question, like, hey, how did you do this? Like, I want to publish my book too. Like, how did you do this? This whole envelope and like me sitting here right now, like would not have been. So like, I've sort of from that adopted the philosophy of like, the answer is always no if you don't ask. So be willing to ask. The worst thing that can happen is they say no or they don't respond to you. And either way, your life remains unchanged from like those responses. So yeah, I guess aside from that, like community and connecting with fellow writers and authors, whether they're traditionally published or indie published, or they go the hybrid route or whatever that looks like. Part of that learning and growing is being in community with others, seeing what they're doing, trying to sort of adapt that and apply it to yourself, taking the knowledge that you have and sort of sharing it with them as well to see if like what you do can maybe help them. It's a very give and take, and like we're all learning and growing together. Like none of us fully understands or knows what we're doing. The market's always changing. Things are always changing. So we constantly have to be growing and adapting and learning throughout the entire process. But as far as like what success looks like as an indie author, I would really say it's sort of different for every person, but broadly speaking, I think success is sort of meeting those goals that you set down for yourself at the beginning of each book journey. Because again, it's going to look different for every single book you write, because every single book you write is different. And your goals are going to be different. The things you want to achieve with those are going to be different. You're going to be different. So sort of meeting those goals that you set for yourself, continuing to just challenge yourself in your craft and grow in your craft. I would consider that a success if that is something that you can say that you do. And then connecting with your audience in a real way. So whatever that looks like for you in your book journey, whether that's sort of the Taylor Swift method of like when she was just starting out, she took her little small town and started playing just gigs at every single restaurant and bar and platform. And then she kept branching out and branching out and branching out. So I've sort of been doing the same thing of taking a bunch of the neighboring towns, doing book signings, or going to the libraries and having conversations with people, or going to the schools. I was just at a school not too long ago and had like my first, I've done like the talks and whatnot, but this was the first time that I did it for like a group of 5th graders. So I had to figure out sort of how to like adapt.
It was so sweet.
It was really cute. It was fun. I had to figure out how to sort of adapt my normal talk to like a 5th grade level.
Yeah.
But it ended up being awesome. And they had some incredible questions. And there were so many people so many of the kids that left like telling me like, I want to be an author, or like, this was so cool, or like, how did you do this? And like, just the more that as you're an author and as you're doing the things that you love and you're leaning into your passions, the more you're doing that and the more other people are seeing you do that, like that inspires them too, to sort of be like, maybe like my dream isn't so crazy, whether it's writing or not. Maybe what they want to do isn't as far out of reach as it might seem to them at that point. So yeah, just any of those different ways of connecting with like the real people, like, that are your readers, that are your fans, that are the people that who knows what they're going to do next, but maybe your story, whether that's your personal story or the stories that you're writing, can touch them in some way. Like I would consider that a success.
No, absolutely. And thank you for sharing, Emily. I mean, what a profound confession. I mean, sharing your failures with others on a public platform, right? But that's what we do. I mean, essentially, we bear ourselves in our books. It's as intimate as it can get. So like, if you can take anything from today's live stream, take an example take a page out of Emily's book and be vulnerable, even with your failures, because at the end of the day, like we're going to laugh at it and it's going to be so much fun. And it's not, in the meantime, ever since Emily's audiobook came out, she put out another book. She's had so many events, so she already put it behind her. So you can see, as you can all see, she can laugh at it and it's completely fine. But thank you so much, Emily. Absolutely. And I think the main thing to take out of your answer to this question would be, do not compare yourself to anybody else.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, the goals that you set for yourself are ultimately the ultimate measure of your success. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for that, Emily. Now, let's venture into your professional life. I mean, besides writing, obviously. So you are a professional marketer, professional social media manager. You do this for a living. So give us some tips on marketing the book without the help of a professional marketer or PR agency. Let's say that this is an up and coming writer looking to write a book, and they just don't have the means, you know, to pay for an agency or a marketer. What do they do?
Yeah, which like is totally understandable and not anything to like feel ashamed about or anything like that. Books that people put in a ton of money into marketing sometimes will do just as well as the people that don't, and vice versa. So yeah, it's finding the ways that you can market and being creative about marketing without like breaking the bank at the same time.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going the indie route, because pretty much all of the marketing is left up to you.
Yeah.
Unless you do the actual hiring out. But
Even,
a lot of the time,
even with the traditional publishing, I'm sorry to jump into this, but
yeah,
even
no,
with the
that's
traditional
true as well.
publisher, they
Yeah.
will, pardon my French, ride your ass about this to promote your book everywhere. So you're not off the hook with the traditional publisher.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, you're 100% right. But yeah, I mean, just I guess to run through a couple things that I mean, again, I'll sort of highlight these, and if anyone has questions or anything like that, like please feel. I think my socials should be down here.
Absolutely. We will link Emily's social so you can connect with her. And we do have questions in the chat. I'm monitoring it, so we will get to those as well. Don't worry, Emily. You have plenty of fans here. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good.
Give us your wisdom.
Feel free to reach out to me and ask specific questions if you have more off of these things that I'm going to talk about. But one of the first things is just collaborations. Word of mouth and getting other people involved in what you're doing is one of the biggest ways that anyone knows about anything. Like, just look at social media. It's one big word of mouth chain. So anytime you can collaborate with someone else, whether that's on a giveaway or a live stream or a reel, a book review, bookish merch, whatever that looks like, most of the time when it comes to posting and social media, that other person and you are both going to be talking about that collaboration. It might be one post, or it might be a series of posts sort of leading up to whatever it is, a live stream or a cover reveal or whatever. But you and that person talking about it gets your face, your name, your book, your story in front of that other person's audience as well. And then vice versa for them. So it's sort of, it's not just you getting, it's them getting as well, which is nice, and why I really, really love collaboration. It's probably one of the biggest things that I do, because I just think they're so fun. And again, you sort of get to learn from other creatives as well when you're doing that. I sort of already mentioned this too, but connect with your audience on a personal level. Show them that you care and that you appreciate them, that you value, that they find value in your work, in your words. So this could be different things like newsletters are super, super important as an author, because that is really one of the only forms of communication with your audience that you have sole control over. If your social media shuts down tomorrow, you're going to lose all those people unless
Which it can. It did happen. You remember that Facebook outage?
I remember the Facebook outage.
It helped. Everybody freaked out. It's absolutely possible. One day it's just going to go all the way. And what are you going to do?
Yeah. So you want to do everything you can to sort of move your audience and your readers off of social media to a newsletter or some sort of platform like that. So I try, and this year specifically, as sort of like a thank you to my newsletter subscribers, every month I'm doing something different. So I'm either, I put out my newsletters monthly. So like for January, I put together like on Canva, like a book club kit for Crimson Time and Fractured Past. So it had like discussion questions, a little letter from me. It had some recipes that they could make with their book club, and a bunch of other like just fun little stuff in it. And so like that was my freebie for January for my newsletter subscribers. So every month this year when I send out my newsletter, there'll be something different that's a little fun and extra and special in my newsletters. So do things to like show your audience that you care about them. They will be and they are your biggest advocates, your greatest fans, and like your best form of advertising, honestly, because their talk about your book is coming from a place of them actually enjoying what you do. You're not paying for them to talk about your book or anything like that. They genuinely want to share about it. So anytime you can sort of tap into them and like encourage them and have them sort of encourage you back and like share your story, that is huge. Going off of that too, I would say form a street team. Just like your newsletter subscribers, your audience, your street team is going to sort of be your boots on the ground to sort of go off of that metaphor. They're going to be the ones sort of championing you. And they'll be the ones that you can sort of like lean on for different things. So like my street team, like I'm about to do a cover reveal pretty soon for like a secret project that I've been working on. Like they're gonna, I don't even think I told you about this, Simona.
No, you haven't, you traitor.
We'll talk after this and I'll tell you, but but yeah, so like my street team are the ones that, aside from like putting it out on social media to ask other people, hey, do you want to be a part of my cover reveal? My street team specifically are the people who I send the images to, and then they make their posts and whatever, and sort of start that chain of the word of mouth for me, which is nice because they get those special benefits of like getting a lot of the information about my books and stuff before anybody else. They get to see the new covers and anything like that, like before anyone else. I do special like giveaways and stuff like that for my street team as well. That's just for them. So again, anything you can do to sort of like make them feel special because they are, and you appreciate like that they value you and your words. And then sort of lastly, one of the things that I think is so underutilized is book boxes and conferences.
Yes.
So
you had me at conferences.
So two sort of separate things, but I'll touch on each one really quickly. But you're going to have to do some research. Again, you get out of it what you put into it. I made a giant list. I went in deep. I made an Excel spreadsheet, keeping track of like all these different book boxes I could apply for. And then I like went through and applied for them. And just like anything else, you're probably going to hear crickets for a long time until you don't, and someone actually gets back to you and you get 1 book box, 2 book boxes, 3 book boxes, 4 book boxes, and it starts to spiral from there.
We do have a coffee chat on that, by the way. So if you guys are interested in book boxes, Emily did a special coffee chat especially for book boxes. So yeah, she shipped her books off to Australia. So if you think that she is like underemphasizing book boxes, she's not. It's a real thing, right? And conferences, Emily.
Yes, and conferences. So whether they're conferences for your specific genre, for indie authors, for like maybe topics, maybe like you write a fiction novel, but like mental health is huge involved in it. Like maybe it's a mental health conference. Different things like that. Like, don't be afraid to apply to those. Again, do your research, get your Excel spreadsheet filled out, and then do the actual outreach. But yeah, I did my first major conference in September in North Carolina. So I got to go to North Carolina, my first time that I was in North Carolina. It was so much fun. And then I have 2 coming up this year as well. So they're super fun. You get to interact with readers. You get to get your book out in the world more.
Publishers attend those as well.
Publishers attend them. Yeah. And depending on like maybe if you're involved in the different talks and whatnot, that's like sort of another level. But sometimes like conferences just let you come and like set up your booth of books and just sell and talk to people. So yeah, look into the specifics of them, research. Again, I feel like you have specific questions, don't hesitate to reach out and I'll try to like help you as well. But yeah, like book boxes and book festivals / conferences, 2 things that if you want to sort of, not that you're not a serious author if you don't do these things, but it's just sort of
It
one
helps.
of those,
Yeah,
it's one of those like
it helps.
additional notches in your belt that sort of just gives you more credibility.
Credibility. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Oh my God, Emily. Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, because of YouTube, we cannot go well past 30 minutes. So we will take one question from the audience. And this is actually a really interesting one. So, what is your take on serialization, fiction series, fiction serialization, serialized content? That's interesting.
Yeah. So I personally have not done serialized content, but I have a lot of friends that have done it. And I have one in particular who like started there and
Kyra?
was like well, Kyra, but my friend Melissa
Oh yeah,
is
Melissa.
like a Wattpad writer now. Like she's paid by Wattpad to like write serialized stories. So yeah, I mean, there's no like no right or wrong answer to this. Like if it's something that you want to lean into, like I say lean into it. Again, it's a way to sort of like put your feet in the water, like test the water.
Yeah.
Too. I know a lot of people who like even started off like writing fan fiction. So like
Yeah.
it could be fan
Absolutely.
fiction or it could be like your own story that you're sort of writing on that sort of platform. But yeah,
Absolutely.
Wattpad, Kindle Vella, there's a lot of different resources out there now.
Mhm.
Um,
I will say though, it takes a lot of this one takes a lot of dedication because here's the thing.
it does.
When people know that you're writing your book, you have a deadline. Let's say they know that your book will come out in a year or so. Okay, they're fine with it. They're not bothering you essentially because they have a deadline and you're committed to that deadline as well as they are. However, with this one, you have to be consistent. You have to deliver on a promise of a
Yeah.
have to deliver on a chapter. And if you do not, it is very easy for your audience to turn your back on you
Yeah.
because they feel betrayed. So
Yeah.
unless you update them, unless you are, oh listen guys, I couldn't give you an update this week. I had a terrible accident, whatever it is. You
Yeah.
need to communicate because they will turn your back on you and they will not come back. So
Yeah.
yeah,
They want to know, they're expecting that you
yeah,
meet whatever, hey, my posts go up every Friday at noon.
yeah,
They're expecting that that is going to be the cadence until
yeah,
your story is done. So yeah,
yeah.
you want to make sure that you're keeping that cadence, and if you're not for whatever reason, that you're communicating why and letting them know when they can expect that like episode instead.
Yeah, absolutely. Until we get to the George R. R. Martin level where he just couldn't be bothered to put out a book. And he even bashes his audience, for being impatient. He's like, leave me alone. We'll get there when we'll get there. Until we get to his level, unfortunately, we have to show a little bit more dedication. Not to say that George isn't dedicated, but So yeah, I mean, I'm offended on behalf of the fandom. I'm offended.
Yeah.
So yeah, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Emily, for joining us. As I said, next week we will have our final live stream about how to submit and what to expect after submission. The deadline is 31st of January, if I'm not mistaken, and until then, please send us your manuscripts for consideration. We'd love to read your book. And until then, see you guys.